Right, hello everyone. I hope you can all hear me and see me. If you can't, then I don't know how you're going to let me know, but we'll get to that. So welcome to this online seminar or webinar, if you prefer. I prefer online seminar, but that's because I'm a bit afraid of new words. On child-to-parent violence, brought to you by Family Lives and Wave Trust and supported by the Department for Education. I'm Jimmy O'Dell. I'm the Digital Comms Officer at Family Lives. I'm the guy that's been emailing you 3 times a week for the last 2 weeks to make sure you all turn up. So welcome and thank you very much for coming. I'm glad that you've managed to log in all right. I'll give you a quick rundown of where things are and then we'll move on. So you've got a little chat window in the bottom left-hand corner where I'm saying hello. And I'm also saying, can you hear me? Because I don't know if you can hear me. That's the funny thing. I'm talking into what looks like a screen, but actually 17 of you there listening. And some of you are saying yes, thank you. That's good. That's very reassuring. So that's where you guys are. Those of you that can't hear me will probably see all these yeses and start saying no. So yeah, that's looking good. That's mostly yeses. It is a bit of a ropey technology at the moment. What's great about doing seminars this way is that you guys are all over the country and possibly all over the world. I know I had 1 or 2 people logging in from Australia, so there's no way that we could get all of you in the same room together at the same time. So it's great that we can do this and that we can all have this time together to learn and discuss and share knowledge and all of that. What's not great is that the technology is still fairly young and fairly new, so sound may cut out from time to time. There's not much we can do about it, but if you are losing sound or video, or if we're going too quickly, then just let us know in that chat window. That's where you guys are. We'll keep an eye on that, and we'll do our best to make sure that you can all hear and stuff. One other thing, I'll be sending around an evaluation form at the end, so please fill those in. It's particularly helpful to know that this format is working for everyone, and if there's anything we can do to make it better. So that will be great. I think that's all. I don't need to do anything about fire exits because you're all in different buildings, and there's no refreshments available unless you brought your own. So hopefully we're all set. I'm going to hand you over to our first speaker in a moment, who is Oliver Standing from Adfam. I'll give you a brief intro on him, although he's probably going to tell you more about himself. He's the Policy and Projects Coordinator for Adfam, currently running their domestic violence project in partnership with Against Violence and Abuse, or AVA. And that project is focused on alcohol and drug using children who abuse their parents. Our second presenter will be Sara Hassell, who's a family coordinator with Family Lives. I'll tell you a bit more about her in a moment. Right, so we'll hand over to Oliver. Oliver, if you want to get your camera and mic switched on, I'll get mine switched off. There'll be a chance for a bit of a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so just use the chat window for that. And I'll hand you over. Here's Oliver. Cheers.
Hello, thanks for that, Jimmy. Well, hopefully you can all both see and hear me. As Jimmy said, there's the chat box in the bottom left of the screen, which you can use to communicate with me if there's any problems, or if you'd like to make a point during the presentation. As he said also, there's going to be an A session at the end of my presentation, which will just be around 30 or 35 minutes, and you can share your experiences and ask some questions of the project and so on then. So great. This technology is new to me also. This is the first time I've ever used it. So we'll see how it goes, but the general way it's going to work is I'm going to run through a PowerPoint presentation. Now normally when I'm speaking to people in the same room, I try to keep the PowerPoint content down to a minimum because it can be rather boring, but I think in this way, with this technology, it actually works rather well. So I'm going to talk through the project, some of the key findings from the project, some of the themes that arose from it, some of our recommendations and conclusions, and then, like I say, we'll have about 5 minutes at the end. Okay. So the project I've called Between a Rock and a Hard Place, which is the name that we gave the report which came out of the project. And like Jimmy said, it's about basically kids who use drugs and alcohol and then abuse their parents. We did it in conjunction with AVA, Against Violence and Abuse, who are a really great domestic violence agency, and it's the second project we've done with AVA. Okay. So this is just a little bit of background statistics for you to have a look at. I might not read through every single one of them, which is just setting the tone and giving a bit of context to the project. This page is on drug and alcohol use, so it makes it clear that it's a big issue which affects family members, and in fact that's Adfam's main area of work really, is championing the cause of family members who are affected by drug and alcohol use. We can see here alcohol is thought to be a factor in at least 1/3 of all domestic violence assaults, and 44% of perpetrators are under the influence of alcohol, 12% of drugs. Similarly, this is just a few statistics on domestic violence, which will also help kind of inform the talk. We can see in the first one, women experiencing domestic violence are 15 times more likely to misuse alcohol and 9 times more likely to misuse drugs. So we can see that it's the victim as well as the perpetrator who may be experiencing some kind of substance use. 1 in 4 children said that they've witnessed domestic violence between adults, and based on a large volume of research, childcare law now includes witnessing or hearing the ill treatment of someone else as causing harm to children. In answer to your questions, yes, I can certainly make this available to everyone. Yeah, not a problem at all. So, just a little bit of background. This was actually the second project which Adfam and AVA collaborated on. The first one ran in 2010 to 11, and we commissioned Dr. Sara of the University of Bedfordshire to do some research. Now, Sara Galvani is one of the top academics working on the intersection between domestic violence and substance use, and she did some really interesting research. And we also made a DVD resource kit, which is for young people working, which is for practitioners working with any young person affected by domestic violence and substance use. That kit is called Thinking It Through, and that's available on the Adfam website. You do have to pay for it, but it's got a DVD. Okay, that's just setting the scene. So the project which we're going to talk about, the one that I've called Between a Rock and a Hard Place, ran the end of 2011 right through 12, and it's just crept into 2013 doing this kind of thing. So the research that Sara Galvani conducted in the first project made a number of interesting findings, one of which was a high level of under-recognised and under-supported abuse which existed between children perpetrating it towards their own parents and the children using drugs and alcohol. Now, when I say children, I don't mean little kiddies children necessarily. I mean children as in they are the child of the victim. So they might be in some cases a child in that they're under 16, but they also may be an adult child. So we found that this type of violence was, I hesitate to use the word tolerated. I hesitate to say there's a high level of tolerance because it implies that perhaps the parents can just do something about it, the victim can do something about it when sometimes they can't. It's not as easy as that. But there was a long period of time between the parents suffering some kind of abuse and them looking for help. They were very slow to identify or characterize what they were going through as domestic violence or domestic abuse. So that was really the basis of the project, this under-researched and under-recognized type of domestic violence. So we want to do something specifically on that. We very much took the view that the people going through these issues every day are the experts. It's not someone like me who's sat at a desk, using a computer, doing research, talking to people, emailing people. There's people out there right now, we know, going through this. That's their real lived experience. So they were the experts, and we wanted them to inform the project. We wanted to see what they were saying, and we wanted to treat them as experts of their own experience, effectively. So we So yeah, we wanted to get out and talk to them. We ended up speaking to 88 people, so that's our sample size. So that's 88 mums and dads who were victims of violence or abuse from their children. Now, when I use the phrase domestic violence, we use that to mean non-physical forms of abuse or violence as well. I more or less use domestic violence and domestic abuse synonymously because it's a debate that you can talk about for hours, but I've just done it in a kind of inclusive way and used both. And yeah, we very much mean violence to not just mean physical violence, although that is the form that's commonly privileged kind of by society. So we used Adfam's existing network of family support groups around the country as our local partners to find these parents and to find who's really going through these experiences. So we partnered up with them and we got 88 parents, like I said, to come to these focus groups. So the ages of the children who were perpetrating this abuse ranged really quite widely from about 11 right up to the late 40s. Most were sons, but not all, and most of the parents who attended the focus groups were mums, but not all. For a significant number of parents, there was a background of domestic violence in their own relationships. And yeah, as I said, about 88% of the parents that came were mums rather than dads. Now that doesn't mean, of course, that 88% of all the victims of child-to-parent violence are women. It just means that they're the people that came to the focus groups. And that reflects a gender bias in the type of people who access this type of mutual support, which is mums and dads coming and meeting and sitting around in a room and talking about what's going on and looking for help in having a family member who uses drugs and alcohol. There is a bias in people seeking that type of help towards women. I think generally evidence suggests that men look for help in a slightly different way, and that's borne out in our sample. So what was the abuse like that reported to us? Well, I think all the parents reported abuse. Lots reported financial exploitation, death threats, serious physical assaults with weapons, destruction of property in the home, and some social isolation caused by emotional abuse and manipulation. Now there's lots of quotes from parents through this because, like I said, we felt they were the real voice of what was going on, so I've interspersed a few. I've had text messages saying he'll have his legs broken if we don't pay 500 quid by this Friday and we've got ourselves into some serious debt. This was a common thing reported by parents. Lots of parents were arrears debts, and things like this were really hard because they didn't know if the child says, Mum, Dad, I owe a dealer 300 quid or 800 quid and this bad thing's going to happen to me. They didn't know if that was genuine or it was the child trying to exploit their worry as a parent to try and get some money out of them. So inevitably, parents don't want to see their kids harmed, so they will pay the money. So impacts on parents included worry, fear, lack of sleep and profound emotional distress for everyone. For some people, there was also serious financial worries, like I said, debts of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds, houses being remortgaged at the most extreme end, of course, a prolonged involvement with the criminal justice system, as you might imagine, and admissions to hospital with child-to-parent violence-related injuries. That's, again, at the most extreme end of the physical abuse. The Met Police did some research a couple of years ago at child-to-parent homicides, and they found that of the 5 that had happened in the time which they looked at, 4 were sons killing their mothers, and 1 was a son killing his father. And in all of them, I think I'm right in saying, in all of them, both drug or alcohol use and some kind of mental health issue was identified, which is as you might expect, but I think does is useful to know. So a significant majority of parents took a long time to find help. We're talking years, even a decade plus for some. Many parents felt guilty or that they'd failed in their parenting role and that the behaviour of the children was at least partly their fault. As I said, some of the mothers identified past DV that had taken place in their family. I still cry buckets over my son because I'm frightened he's going to die before me, one parent said, and another said, I 100% totally believe it was my fault because the partner I had at the time abused him. And that worry is largely being corroborated society, which is very keen to use as a root cause, and the main root cause, parenting skills to behaviour and bad behaviour of young people and adolescents, and sometimes even children into adulthood. Now, obviously parenting does play a big role in that, but I don't think it's the only factor, and we've got to wonder at what point you draw a line and say, actually, this person's 18 or 20 or 16 or wherever you want to look at and say they are responsible for their own actions. You know, it's tricky, but it's certainly not 100% the fault of the parents. Many parents spoke of a double stigma that they faced in society from both the drug use and the violence they experienced. They were often scared of admitting what they were experiencing to professionals, but also to their own neighbours, families and friends. Okay, so lots of people refer to this, it's like a compound stigma. Now we know that, firstly, having a drug or alcohol user in the family can create a massive amount of stigma in itself. Yeah, that's hard enough. Secondly, like with victims of partner abuse, these parents are going through having someone they love abuse them. And then the third thing is that that person abusing them is their own child. So all of society's expectations about what it means to be a parent and still how taboo it is to reject your child, all these things come into play with the drug use. And we know particularly heroin and crack and some styles of alcohol use are still create a lot of stigma in society. All of these things came together to form a compound stigma, a multi-layered compound stigma, which exerted a really heavy negative effect on parents when they looked for help. So one mum said, one of my parents said, it's because you're a one-parent mother, which is not too helpful. And another said, the guilt is crippling, it's absolutely crippling. Knowing what to call child-to-parent violence and how to conceptualise it was very problematic for parents, and indeed I might add for practitioners and policymakers. So one mum said, you don't label it as that, domestic violence, not until you start speaking to someone and you start thinking, actually, this isn't normal, this isn't what my 16, 17-year-old son should be doing. Although you do know it, it's strange. It's actually only when you hear these words that you actually think, and it sounds really dumb, it sounds really stupid, maybe that's part of the denial. Now, I don't think that sounds dumb or really stupid at all, actually, because of the factors I've just identified. Of course, a mum or dad isn't going to want to face up immediately to the fact that, you know, or at least thinking about the fact that their child is abusing them. Of course, they're not going to want to do that. It's hard enough for victims of partner abuse, and as I said, there's some additional factors, I think, for parental victims. So some people did say it took that moment of a third party or an objective party or someone else, even if they're not objective, a best mate, a sister, to use the phrase or to just ask the question, you know, would you be putting up with this from someone else, to for your dad to have a moment of partial realisation and for that idea to be crystallised. If it's said out loud, it's incredibly powerful. If you say that out loud, the problem leaves your head and it's out there and someone's got to deal with it. And I think that encouraging that initial disclosure is really hard, but it's really important for kind of us as practitioners to encourage parents to feel comfortable and to ask the right questions to get them to that stage. So what were the barriers to them finding support? Okay, there was a lack of awareness of existing support, especially family support groups. Lots of people said that they'd found these family support groups and they were fantastic, and they really spoke of them in the highest possible level of praise. They said they were a lifeline, an oasis, a calm, a godsend. More than one person said, if it wasn't for this group here and these people here, I wouldn't be here. More than one person said that, and I don't think you can get a higher level of praise for something than someone saying, I wouldn't be here without it. So these kind of informal grassroots family support groups were praised very highly by the people who attended them who were victims of child-to-parent violence. Another thing that many people said was, God, I didn't know this was here until 5 years ago or even 1 year ago, and I live on the next street. I've lived there for 10 years, and I didn't realise there was people in my city, in my town, who were going through what we're going through. So many people said to us, we thought we were on our own. We just thought it was a unique problem that we were facing, and we had to deal with it, and all the energies were projected inwards to the family, and it was bottled up with occasionally really bad consequences. And when they took that step of thinking, God, actually I need some help, whether it's in something like a family support group, a peer support, or through a professional route of a domestic violence service or a drug treatment service, that's such a big step to look for help. Parents did not see themselves as legitimate recipients of support. This is a really important point and one of our headline findings. Parents generally characterised the abuse they were suffering as a direct result or a symptom of the child's drug or alcohol use. They did not see it as a separate problem. Now, I'm not saying the two are not interlinked, of course they are, but we can't assume that abuse is a mere symptom of drug and alcohol use. I don't think that's what the evidence supports, and certainly with partner violence, we don't treat it like that at all. We say it's a problem, it needs sorting out, and the perpetrator needs to be challenged, and someone needs to work with them to stop this behaviour because it's unacceptable. Now, that's not to say that drug and alcohol treatment shouldn't also be sought for that person's problems. They definitely should. But I don't think we can assume that if that person's drug or alcohol issues go away, the abuse is going to stop, especially if it's a really long-standing problem and that pattern of behaviour has become really embedded in the relationship. The domestic violence is about a perpetrator exerting power and control over the victim, and the drug or alcohol use may influence that, but it's not the sole motivating factor. So parents weren't looking for help for themselves generally, they were looking for help for their child who had a drug or alcohol problem. A lack of awareness of drugs and signs. Lots of parents said this. They were the first to admit we didn't know anything about drugs. The drugs now are different to when we were young. We don't understand what these drugs are. Nothing like this ever happened in our family, that kind of thing. One parent there you can see said, I used to think addicts were from bad families. They didn't expect it would happen to them. I think we all have that thought. No one ever thinks anything bad's going to happen to them, do you? It's human nature. And there was a lack of consensus on the best course of action within couples sometimes. So you had mum was feeling tough and resilient and doing the tough love thing, and dad was worn down, exhausted, and was, giving in a bit more for a bit of peace and quiet. Again, it's human nature. And then maybe a month or two later, the roles were reversed, and dad was taking a hard line and doing tough love, and the mum was not. So that can create internal conflict on how best to deal with the situation. Shame and stigma, I already mentioned this a little bit. It was quite shocking to hear that that could come from within the families. We definitely couldn't assume that these mums and dads, even though they were victims of domestic abuse, would necessarily have the support unconditionally of their own family members. There's a really powerful quote here, I think. You can talk to strangers when you can't talk to your own family. I get too upset. My twin sister doesn't know my son is a drug addict, and he's been an addict for 20 years, and she doesn't know, and she'll come tomorrow. She's coming on Friday, and I want to tell her, but I don't because I feel ashamed. I think that's almost heartbreaking that a mum said that to us. 20 years, and this wasn't a sister that she saw infrequently or was estranged from or anything. This was a sister she was close to, and she couldn't share this massive, massive part of her life. Yet she could come to a family support group and talk to people who initially were strangers. Obviously she built up a relationship with them, but initially come and talk to strangers. So actually in this case, a bit of distance. It's the kind of strangers on a train syndrome where you can talk about intimate problems to someone who doesn't have an emotional or familial stake in what you're going through. So first disclosures. No one clear pathway really dominated completely here. There were some trends. The most common professional that was sought out largely was the GP, although often this was a kind of tangential seeking out, where the mum or dad might present with stress or anxiety or not sleeping, and then if the GP was good and doing their job, they'd get to the bottom of it and they'd find out that the stress or anxiety or lack of sleep was actually stemming from this pretty major problem they had at home. The police were involved by a number of parents, but generally at crisis points or points of desperation or points when they felt they were at risk physically, or a third party was, like another sibling. Lots of mums and dads looked at the internet for Frank, which is quite funny because it was set up for young people. But I think because it's government and because it's visible and you see it on bus stops and at adverts, it has an air of legitimacy for parents. So they looked for drug information basically, especially some of the newer club drugs, things like methadone, ketamine, some of the legal highs. Parents generally had a low level of knowledge about those, as indeed a lot of people do. So what were they looking for? Signposting, reassurance, shoulders to cry on, and practical strategies on avoiding arguing and conflict. So that's just to point out that they're looking for both the practical side and the strategic side and the emotional side and the shoulders to cry on, someone to say, it's not your fault. Support is needed at the beginning when trouble is just brewing rather than further down the line when it's more extreme. I think we can all agree with that. Emotional support from someone neutral. Someone to say, it's not your fault. Very powerful. I was looking for strategy more than anything. So, what were their negative experiences of seeking support? Confidentiality. Lots of people ran into that, either because they wanted to support their child's treatment journey and they rang up a drug treatment agency, or they were worried about them because they'd not seen them for a few days and they kind of rang up to say, have you seen them? Has he come to his appointments? We've not seen him. Now that's a bit of an ongoing issue, the confidentiality thing, certainly not unique to this project. I know lots of carers have come up against that. A general feeling of failure of services and basically people not listening. So one mum very forthrightly in Manchester said, services treat carers like a piece of dirt. They don't want to know, they've got no empathy. Which is, obviously that's just one experience. I'm not saying all the people were treated like that at all. Lots of them had fantastic experiences of some services, but she felt that there was an overall sense of failure, being let down, not being listened to, services not talking to each other, services not joining up, passing the buck. The big one, of course, is the dual diagnosis thing, mental health, drug treatment. Lots of parents said, well, the drug service won't do anything till the mental health sorted out, and the mental health service won't do anything because he's on drugs, and they say his drug use has to be remedied. So this is leading on to this one really. The mental health professionals and the drug and alcohol professionals don't mix. They don't work together. They pass the buck like something not right. They badmouth each other's services, talk a load of waffle, and run rings around you. So that's quite a damning one. And I think we're at a point where most services are being kind of starved for money, and in a way that might make it even harder for everyone to talk to each other because everyone's worried about doing their bit and just getting their remit done and making sure they do a good job. So it's a challenge, isn't it? But I think that one always comes up. A lack of empathy, blindness displayed at our door as parents, one person said. So some specific examples of negative responses were reported from social services. I think that was probably the worst reported service of all the ones that were covered, actually, social services. The general feedback on them, which I'm not saying is universal, I'm just kind of reporting what the parents said, was that they were so keen or so fixated on child protection that the idea that actually the adults, the parents might need a bit of help, wasn't really on the radar. So we had one mum who was having problems with, say, a 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, thought she was doing the right thing, went to social services for some help, and their response was basically, right, well, we see you've also got a 9-year-old, and we need to look at their safety and maybe put them on some kind of protection plan. And the idea that she would get help didn't really happen. Church, Police, we had some really bad reports of the police, but we also had some really good ones, hearteningly. Probation, hospital staff, GP, again, very mixed, some really glowing reports of fantastically understanding GPs, some pretty bad ones. Youth offending, psychiatrists, and on. But we had positive experiences from parent support groups, police, GPs, paramedics, social services, AA, counselling, and the church. Now, you probably noticed that some of those services appeared on both of these slides, and that's just to make the point that the reports that came from the parents of the level of support they got from services was so patchy, and they varied immensely geographically. So it's quite tricky to draw out trends because, like I said, police and GPs, for instance, very mixed reports. Now, we had some that we almost universally praised, like parent support groups, and then we had some others which were more towards the negative, but almost all of them received a fairly mixed report. So what helps are valued by parents? Well, perhaps touched on a couple of these. A welcoming atmosphere, feeling of acceptance rather than judgment, meeting others, sharing experiences, being able to be honest, not have to worry about shocking others. People talked about the family support groups as being welcome because there was a sense of the people there being unshockable. If they went into that room and had to say, oh, I've had a really stressful week because my son went out, didn't see him all night, came back the next day, was completely, off his head, and he smashed up his house, they're not going to be met just with gasps of horror because the other people in that room are going through those kind of things. So they don't have to worry about all that shame and stigma that I talked about earlier. They're going to get people who will understand largely and who can offer up some empathy and understanding. So they wanted a space to think about themselves. Very powerful point here about how domestic abuse shuts down the horizons of the victim. That element of coercive control prevents people seeing the options that are open to them. It really shuts them down and almost makes them see the world through the eyes of the perpetrator. Everything they do becomes kind of recalibrated around them and their needs. So this idea of the support group as a safe space for them to come and talk about themselves and their needs was quite powerful. Reassurance, encouragement, reducing isolation, again that's the coercive control element of abuse. To be treated as a concerned and loving family member and not the cause of the problem. An acknowledgement that they're trying their best. Again, I think really important. We ask a lot of victims. These were all people who are just leading normal lives. They've got jobs. They're going through all the everyday stresses and strains in human relationships that we all do. And on top of that, they've got this problem of a child using drugs and alcohol and someone close to them that they love abusing them. So, we ask a lot. If we don't make services decent for them, and if we don't make this, it's really hard, and we do need to acknowledge that they are trying to find a solution and trying their best. A lot of partner violence, but some key differences, of course. People not calling it abuse or domestic violence. It's definitely much more pronounced than partner. Unwillingness to involve the criminal justice system. Lots of the kids were already in trouble with the police, so the parents took the line of, well, I don't want to get them into even more trouble. The parent-child bond, seen as unbreakable, is still taboo to admit to not liking your child. It's still taboo, to a certain extent, to kick your child out of the house, and must be difficult to not let your child in, to have a shower, have some food when you know that maybe they're living in a hostel or on a friend's sofa or even living on the street. Huge amount of shame and stigma, we've seen that. Lack of information and advice. The risk sometimes not recognised by professionals. Seems to have been a particular type of pain for some fathers who talked about how they felt they'd failed not only as a parent but maybe as a man or as a husband. Some idea that as the head of the family, as they felt it, they failed. The most common age was between 12 and 14 for starting. Some parents reported a trigger event like changing schools, new set of friends, the death of a grandparent, that kind of thing. Lots of parents said around this age they found it hard to differentiate between what they thought of as normal teenage stroppiness, angst, standard family conflict, for want of a better phrase, and something more serious going on, like some problematic drug or alcohol use. And lots of them, in retrospect, could see that the drug problem or the alcohol problem had gone on for longer than they initially thought, but the symptoms they ascribed to the child, being stroppy or going through puberty or having a stressful time at school or having a new set of mates and being a bit, just being a bit of an angsty teenager. The policy and service framework that currently exists is failing to meet the needs of parents. I think that's a pretty headline finding. Problem with the child to parent violence stuff at a policy level is it doesn't fit neatly within any one area. Obviously, I say obviously, we think that it should fit within domestic violence, policy, but especially when the drugs and alcohol are in the mix, the whole thing kind of exists at an intersection between the domestic violence sector, the drug and alcohol sector, the family / parenting / kind of family dynamics, family conflict, that kind of stuff. And everyone's got a stake in it, but no one person owns it. And that's borne out by the kind of conflicting or varying terminology that's used. Is it child to parent violence? Is it domestic abuse? Is it parent abuse? Is it family conflict? Is it, I don't know, something else? If you look in the literature, lots of different languages used, and people come from quite different angles to it. So it's quite a messy thing to talk about in some ways. What motivates children and young people to perpetrate child to parent violence is still not fully understood. There's a bit of a dearth of research on it, and the amount of research on the specifically drug and alcohol related stuff is, scant to the point of non-existence. I think lots of the research is from America and Australia, which is not a problem in itself, but it means that there's different cultural factors which we have to take into account. Blah blah blah. Let's get through those. So what would parents recommend? I'm nearly getting to the end. What would parents recommend? More family support groups, for schools to be involved and signpost families, more powers for the police, a couple of people said, more money for trained drug and alcohol workers, less stigma and judgment from professionals. It's important there's an acknowledgement that behaviours shown by teenagers aren't always the fault of the parents. Quite a good quote there. Listen to carers, give absolute respect to anyone who is caring for someone who is a user. Listen to us, we will give you the truth. And I love that last quote. It's kind of powerful and poetic in its simplicity, I think. What were our recommendations? Some of these are quite big. I'm not sure we'll be able to do them on our own, but increase recognition of CPV at a national policy level, include it in the standard definition of domestic abuse, and I'll just say something at the end about the definition. Increase awareness of it in family support groups. Improve multi-agency working between services. Well, wouldn't everyone like that? Existing forums should be used to better tackle child to parent violence. For instance, MARACs and other things. Grassroots voluntary organisations are better funded to support parents. Yeah, wouldn't everyone like that again? And enable those that do support families to better help parents. And the very last thing is supporting the development of perpetrator programs for under 21s. Now, the perpetrator programs for under 21s are, again, almost non-existent, and for a number of reasons which I won't go into, the ones that are for over 21s generally aren't thought to be suitable. So Respect, which is the national membership organisation for people running perpetrator programs, are doing some work on that, so we are going to support them in any way we can. And yeah, so that's that. I've just said a very quick thing about the definition, and then if we go over to Q&A, we've got 5 minutes, Jimmy. So with the definition, there was a recent cross-departmental definition consultation put out by the government on the definition of domestic violence, and one of the parts within it was asking whether people thought the definition should be expanded to include 16 and 17-year-olds as within the definition, so that could be either as perpetrators or victims. So we made a response, and Ava made a response saying that yes, we did think that was a good idea, and the good news is, as of March this year, the definition is changing. So from March, the official definition for, well, the government definition, obviously it's not the only one, but the government one will include 16 and 17-year-olds, which I think is good for the child to parent violence angle, because it means if the 16 and 17-year-olds perpetrating it, they now fall on the official definition, and that will probably hold a bit more weight and maybe getting them to Marax or other things like that. So I'm aware that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the presentation and through the project, but if we've got 5 minutes, I hope we're okay and I haven't taken too long, but if we've got 5 minutes, if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the box. I'm going to put my email address in the box as well, so if you think of anything, please do email me. The other thing is, one of the outcomes of this project, or outputs rather, was I wrote a series of briefings on this issue, and there's one for parents and family members, there is one for practitioners, and there's one for commissioners, and I can send those out or send a link or something to those as well. So, okay, for the questions, who funded the research? The research was, well, the project as a whole was funded by the Department of Health. Yeah, so that was us doing the focus groups, writing the report. Actually, I should say the second part of this project has been using the learning from this to roll out some training, which is going on now, has nearly finished actually, and that's gone down really well. It's been great to meet practitioners, get out there and hear their experiences, and that's been positively evaluated. Yeah. How did we access 88 parents? Well, we accessed them through our Adfams, I should say, existing contacts with family support groups around the country. So on the Adfam website, if you go onto it, at the top right hand corner, you can click through to a map of these family support groups. Now, they're not funded by Adfam, they're not run by Adfam or anything like that, but we champion them and we support them in any way we can. So they're set up by usually mums or dads of drug or alcohol users, and we've got good professional links with them. So we contacted a few that we thought might be interested in the project and said, look, do you want to partner up? You can be our local partners. Can you source the parents? Can you find the ones who are interested? We gave the parents a £20 voucher, I should say, which is like a high street voucher that can be used at a number of shops as a thank you for their time. And yeah, then we went around the country. We've got a good geographical spread. We did the 9 government regions, so we're up in Newcastle and all these different places. I hope that answers that one. Any idea how the statistics for child-to-parent violence compare with other countries? Off the top of my head, no, I don't know, I'm afraid. I'm not even sure. I'd like to hazard a guess. If you email me, I can try and find some research or something which might give some of that information. There has been research from other countries, like I said, including some from Europe, and I know that the European one flagged up some kind of difference in the type of abuse between countries and also between boys and girls perpetrating it, but I'm not sure about the amounts, so I will get back to you. Does the new definition of domestic violence apply to Northern Ireland? I'll double check, but I think it does. Don't quote me on that, but I will. Again, I can double check. Do you see any benefit in having a separate child-to-parent violence strategy and definition to the domestic violence strategy definition, but alongside each other? That's a good question. Well, I think thinking practically, it's a much more achievable aim to have it included in the kind of normal domestic violence strategy and included within the normal definition. I don't know, in a way I think it's healthy to have them both together and to not say that this is categorically different to partner violence, because there are some similarities. There are lots of differences as well, of course, but I wouldn't have a problem with this being covered thoroughly in the normal domestic violence strategy and acknowledged within the normal, for want of a better word, domestic violence definition. I think if it's in there in an appropriate and sensitive way, and that is taken on by practitioners and policymakers, I personally think that would be okay. There are some measures that need to be taken that are specific to child-to-parent violence, such as developing the perpetrator programs for under 21s, and the abuse does have to be treated differently to partner violence. So there's some caveats to it, but okay, so someone says statistics on child-to-parent violence are not available in the UK to my knowledge. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I think they are quite sketchy. There's some information from, like I mentioned, the Met Police, but that's at the extreme end of child-to-parent homicides and stuff like that, so it's not perhaps at the less extreme end. Do you know of any child-to-parent violence statistics by ethnicity or gender? There's some of the research indicates a bias in gender, yes. Now, whether, as I said before, whether sort of really good statistics, data sets exist for that is probably not. It is gendered. We think there's a gender towards boys or men, sons perpetrating it, and we think there's a bias towards mums being the victims of it, so definitely. There is some evidence that claims there wasn't much of a bias and there's more gender parity, but that's like 1 or 2 papers out of quite a few, and even in those they did find a gender bias in the type of abuse that was perpetrated. So sons favoured physical abuse and the daughters favoured non-physical abuse, emotional and verbal, and I guess that kind of reflects wider gender roles and stuff like that within society. Ethnicity, I don't know. I'm not sure there's much information on that, to be honest. But again, I can have a look. I don't think there's a great deal. Okay, one more question.
So I've said one more question, and now there are 3 people typing, so it'll be a case of who hits the enter button first.
Okay.
And
if
there are any other questions, we can cover them later.
Okay, right. I'm just scrolling up to get that question. It would seem that perpetrators are predominantly male. Is there any relationship to lack of good role models or lack of a period of rites of passage as in other cultures? Good question. Perpetrators are predominantly male. Yeah, we think that's true. Is there a relationship to a lack of good male role models? Yeah, sure. I would definitely think so. I think... Well, I mean, in terms of evidence, there is some evidence to suggest that exposure for boys at a young age to domestic violence, either being a victim of it or being a witness to it amongst adult partners, does make them a bit more likely to commit it later on. Now, it's not... I'm really loath to kind of stress that too much because you don't want to fall into the trap of kind of condemning these young boys to growing up into a certain type of men. And of course, the majority don't do it, and lots use it as a way of informing more positive kind of attitudes to women when they become adults. But I think there is some evidence that the type of masculinity they observe in adults as children in intimate partner relationships may lead to an increased perpetration of domestic violence later on. So lack of good role models, I would say yes. I mean, I can't cite a specific study to that, but I would have thought there was some information out there on it. A lack of period of rites of passage as in other cultures. I don't know. I mean, it's it's an interesting thought, and quite possibly, I don't know. Probably have to look to kind of academic research into that to see if someone's done a study on that, and to look at levels of domestic violence across quite different communities and societies set against their traditional kind of rites of passage type phase of the lives of young men, and to see if there's any correlation. Who knows? Break for Change. Sorry, one last thing. Someone actually told me about Break for Change yesterday, so thank you for pointing that out. I'll definitely check it out, and I will definitely check out Band of Brothers Brighton as well. So thank you very much. I've probably run over, but been really great to have you here, and I'll switch back to Jimmy. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver, and I'll take full responsibility for you running over. That was great, thank you. And it's great that the discussion is so lively, but I'm also aware of time. So we will switch over to Sara. Sara Hassell, as I think I mentioned earlier, is a family coordinator. She's been working with family lives for the last 8 years, and she's also worked as a play therapist within a child and family psychiatric hospital. Now, Sara's going to be talking about some of the tools that Family Lives uses to support abused parents. And the discussion that's begun now can continue afterwards. We'll have some Q&A with Sara, and maybe we'll get Oliver back as well, depending on how we're doing for time. So if you'll bear with us for a minute or two, Sara, you can get your camera and mic switched on. That'd be great. Thanks. Slight panic from Sara as she realizes she can't do that until I've turned her into a presenter, which I've done now. All right, Sara, we can hear you, but we can see you, but I don't think we can hear you yet.
That's now turned on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you, which hopefully means everybody else can.
Is that okay? I hope they can.
Yeah.
Okay, so I need to go to close his presentation. I know you can all hear me. This is my first one too, so I'm just working out. And now I go to mine. Let's hope. There we go. Sorry about the delay. And then I want to go to slideshow. Jimmy, I might need a little bit of help here.
I'm here. What did you need, Sara?
Slides.
So just use the next button to go through. Do you want to get rid of your thumbnails?
Where is the next? Yes, I do. So how do I do that?
So the next button, do you see my cursor
Which one's that?
hovering
Is that
there?
one? To get rid
This
of the
button
thumb.
is just below me there.
Yes.
There you go.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. Welcome. So sorry about that and the delay. I thought it would be worthwhile splitting this into two. One, obviously, is the area of family lives themselves, and the data that we've collated over a period of time based around the calls that we get and the people who come into our website and use our services as an indicator as well about child-to-parent violence. So I thought that those statistics and that evidence would actually be really useful. Now, the full report, in fact, you can actually get from our own website, and it's on the front page of that website if you want to download that. So I've pulled out the main points that I thought would be quite good today, but I also wanted to spend some time talking to you about my role at Fairlands Primary School as a family support coordinator, and the actual work that I'm doing with children and families really from 0 to 11, because some of that real experiences can put it into context with about a lot of what Oliver was talking about. And putting that into context, if we're actually getting families much earlier, Oliver was talking about that 12 to 14 age bracket, where we begin to see the behaviour. And what I want to do is show you some of the work that we do about how to gauge the behaviour and what might be going on underneath the behaviour. And for parents, if they get that much earlier, what a difference it would make when these children begin to show these very outlandish behaviour at 12 onwards. I wanted to also mention that in the 8 years I've worked for Family Lives, the work I do in the primary school actually started because I did a 3-year project paid for by the government around supporting families whose children were bullies. So I worked within a secondary school and this primary school. And after the 3-year project ended, the primary school felt that in fact it had become such a natural pathway to think of support as normal, and normalising it meant that they felt that in fact they couldn't do without the project. So out of their pupil premium money, they used that to fund my work 21 hours a week. So I am the only one, but I think at the end of the presentation, and what I know to be true, that we need one of us in every school. And it fits, in fact, with a lot of what Oliver was saying, which it will touch on all through with what Oliver was saying. We'll touch on what I'm going to say to you too. So one of the first things I think that's really important, and this is whether I'm in school, whether we are based in a school or if we're out in the community or if you're coming into a sign, is that we are confidential. I think for families, a non-statutory organisation can make the biggest difference as to whether they want to open up to you or not. And we're often the first port of call for that very reason. Now, obviously, it's the same guidelines as anyone else. If there was a risk of harm, then that changes, and every parent would always know that that would be different under those circumstances. It's accessible, it's free, it's inclusive, around the clock, it's for everyone. And really, I'm talking about now the helpline that we have. I don't want to spend too much time. I've taken this from another presentation, but since I knew there were some people phoning in from Australia and from wherever, it was important for those who may not know of our existence, just to put it in context. We're very professional, leading, developing services. Most of our work is around volunteering and using volunteers. As you can imagine, in the current climate, that becomes so important. You know, the government wants to be using the volunteer sector in a different way, and sadly, because of cuts, the voluntary sector is having to provide some of those statutory services that used to be there and filling in the gaps. So as you can imagine, we are very busy. Commentating, looking at our website, you will see how we commentate and what goes on. Trustworthy. The fact that families can ring us at any time, day or night, is so important. Ethic and non-judgmental. Let's hope, I think we all believe that that's the way we all should be, and the importance of that. So I'm trying to move to the next slide. Oh, it worked. Our mission statement. Oh, now it's moved to. Go back. I can. Sorry, I forgot. Jimmy did tell me there was a 5 to 10 second delay, but in my hurry, I didn't see that. We work around the clock, transforming the lives of families, changing families to make it happier families, I suppose. Our experience enables us to help families with problem or challenge, any problem or challenge that they face. So let's go on to the next area. Sorry guys, it's on my side. Okay, we help 1 million children a year by working with over 600,000 families. The best way to help children is to support the people who care for them, and that's why being a parent support worker, or as we now call them, family workers, is so important, and the periphery people around them are so important. I think that I really wanted to begin to show you really that have come in from the helpline about parental worries, and I'm just going to give you a minute or two to have a read of these. So, as you can see, when we've asked parents about their worries and concerns, and this was an online survey that we did, you can see that the largest percentage was that of angry outbursts, and that really concerned the callers, obviously, in a very big way. And we're talking about all ages of children. The other one, obviously, is the behaviour towards parent or carer. That's the second largest of those calls, was parents child towards parent, and the other one is siblings, as you can see, is the third largest. Yes, it's the third group. Now, what can often happen is if behaviour isn't checked for whatever reason, that aggressive behaviour is happening, then the sibling violence, which is where it may start, soon leads into when the parent actually tries to intervene, that then the behaviour gets directed towards the parent. So noticing those early signs perhaps of even some of the lower ones here, destroying property, you may well find that if that behaviour goes unchecked and a parent doesn't really have the skills or the understanding of why their child's doing that, it can then lead to the bigger problems of them hitting their parents. People under other responses, that was quite interesting because we then obviously asked more questions about, well, what might other mean? What else might be worrying a parent? Using drugs, self-harm, low self-esteem, depression, mood swings, shoplifting and taking money, bullying, attention-seeking behaviour, threatening to harm, eating issues, a child who was very easily led, unsuitable role models. Easily led astray is I think everyone who's a parent, you know, you see the bigger picture and you worry, well, if they start doing that, then what happens next? So those are the sorts of calls that we get on the helpline. Violence and aggression, the facts and figures, and this is, in fact, as I've said to you, you will get in more detail if you go onto our website on the front page, and it's called When Family Life Hurts, is the actual downloadable document. So what we've got here is the statistics from Parentline. This showed that, and just to clarify, I call Family Lives, the helpline is actually still called Parentline. So stress, confusion, isolation, and anger have increased by an average of 5.3%, where a child is being verbally aggressive, and about 5.4% in calls where a child is physically aggressive. Now, these are 2011 figures. We are still awaiting the 2012 figures. Those won't come out really probably until March, until they're collated. And I imagine this year those are likely to have gone up. Calls about a child's physical aggression had risen last year by 2%, and calls about a child's verbal aggression had risen by 4%. 42.9% of calls about behaviour related to children between 13 and 15, which sort of fits with what Oliver was saying, that puberty time, if you like, and the importance of peer relationships rather than input from parents becomes to be more important. There have been 863 calls since April 2012, where the call taker entered abuse as the primary adult reason for the call. So that includes the helpline, live chat, and our email service. And within this, 225 mentioned abuse by child. Now, until we get those figures collated, we can't be more specific. That's just what I was able to get off in the interim. So do watch out, because it would be really quite interesting to look at how many of those 863 actually there was a problem with child abuse, child abusing a parent. Children who are physically aggressive were significantly more likely to be using drugs or to be in a bad crowd. And I imagine that's referring again to that 13 to 15 age group rather than very small children. And children were more likely to suffer from identified or unidentified depression if they have behavioural issues. And I think that that definitely is what I would say in the work that I've done. So now, the slideshow that I put together actually had little bits coming in on themselves. So I'm really sorry to tell you that this one, putting aggressive behaviour into perspective, was supposed to be separate, and the next few around the tools were supposed to have bits coming in and added to. So you have to bear with me, because it now looks a little crowded. But if we put it into perspective, the best for me to do that really is to talk about the project and the work that I'm doing. But what I wanted to just do before that is talk about these incidences of physical or verbal aggression. Some of that is normal behaviour. You know, how often have you had the little toddler who's gone to hit, and then you thought to yourself, well, I need to check that behaviour, I need to, there needs to be a boundary here. And it's about children checking the boundaries and checking what's okay and what's not okay. It's an important part of learning and growing, really, and it's an opportunity for both parent and child to negotiate. However, the data does suggest that a steadily increasing minority of families are battling with much more entrenched and complex problems that point towards concerns around their child's emotional and mental health. So at this point, I thought it was a good point actually to talk about, okay, so what would those entrenched and complex problems be? And I think if I give you an idea of the school that I'm in, although we're in a lovely, leafy Hertfordshire area, a lot of these families were families that were moved out from the East End in the 1950s and 60s, and they were the troubled families of those areas, and they were put out into green sites. A lot of them are third generation non-working families, very low attainment. If I give you just a few stats, 34% of our last year's intake were free school meals, which is double the national average. There was 31% of pupils from minority ethnic groups, much higher than the national average, which is 23.3%, and our EAL is 19%. Vulnerable groups, we have a traveller site, large Bangladeshi community, Black African, and 30% of children at the school of this current year group have records of concerns relating to significant harm or abuse of a variety of kinds. So it really is that group we're talking about with entrenched and complex problems is the work that I'm doing in the school. What do I do and how do I work? I think that one of the most important elements is that my role is actually to work with the parents. It's to work with the families who are dealing with these children with these behaviours. How I do that is in a number of different ways. I run parenting groups, which Oliver touched on, one from his sources of how empowering those groups are. I also do individual support. For a number of these families, going into a group setting is just too great. So I can be working, I've been in this school nearly 6 years. I may work with a family for up to 3 years before they will have the confidence to go into a group setting. So you're looking at families with very low self-esteem, very low confidence, a number of them never having achieved what they consider to have achieved anything, tended to be children people who themselves felt school as alien, found it difficult even to come in through the school gate. So often my work will be outside the school gate, talking to families on the outside because some of them never come in. And it's so important to meet them where they feel comfortable. I run a lot of one-to-one sessions, building a family's confidence. How would they exist? I go to every meeting that they may come to. So if it's their first look around the school to the first meeting the term before, now families will often let you know that they're already worried about a child's behaviour. And I'm talking about a nursery. So I might be working with that family before their child even enters into the school. That also helps with deciding what class a child might go into. Because if we know that Johnny's behaviour is going to be X, we may decide actually, well, he shouldn't actually go in with Y, whose behaviour is even worse, because in fact we need to balance classes and support teachers to manage the workload. That can make a big difference to a family. So working with a family before they even enter the school is vital. Toddler do that on a weekly basis. So I might be picking up babies before they're born, seeing that in fact that parent is having a real struggle in setting limits, having difficulties because in fact they are a drug or alcohol user or suffering from depression, or any of the things in fact that Oliver was talking about before really is mirrored often in the parent. And so if we're supporting them much earlier, it makes a big difference. And in a way, it's a very generic way of working with a family. It's much less stigmatized if you say, I've got a toddler group running, than saying, you need help, you can't, not bonding with that little baby, come in. So parents will begin to come in, and also we're normalizing getting help, and I think that's really important. So the other thing I run is a fathers group. From that fathers group, fathers now have chosen to, other than the group I run, they now meet monthly and run their own support group that any father can join, and that has been invaluable. Again, it goes back to what Oliver was saying about how do we get more fathers and men involved, looking at their own aggressive tendencies and what they may have passed on to their children. And also, because I'm working with so many families where there's been domestic violence, we want to be able to support fathers to be able to change behaviour, and for women to change their behaviour as well towards men. So I also work very closely with CAMS, the mental health teams, social workers, and when I say we tend to do joint work. So I may have a parent from school and a child from school, and I will be going with them to their CAMS session, and I work with them in between. So it acts as a real prompt. And what family therapists are saying is it means that the work that they do is quicker, it's more effective, because the parent has already begun to look at what might be behind the child's behaviour with me. How would they do that? I wanted to show you this tool, and this is one of our very first tools. ACT being an acronym, obviously. If we're looking first, what I've got to get a parent to do is begin to look at themselves, the adult. So what might be going on for me? What might be going on for that parent? What we know is if your child is being violent to you, you're very likely to be reacting. You may want to start and say, oh, I did all the softly, I was gentle with them, but it didn't stop, and now I've had to get tough. What we know is to check out how you yourself first are feeling. What might be going on for you, and what do you need to happen? I'm sure you all have thought of times when you think to yourself, well, it can be dependent on how you're feeling as to how you react. So it's really important when you feel a child is going to be aggressive, or aggressive behaviour is beginning to escalate, you need to check how you are, because you need to be in the right frame of mind to deal with the behaviour. So for some parents it may be that they have to walk away first before they get involved, because otherwise what we know can happen is the behaviour can escalate where a parent actually hits back. So how might they be feeling, what might they be needing, is important to look at before they try and challenge the child. And what's important sometimes, before you even challenge the behaviour, is to check out what might be going on for the child, what might they be feeling, and what might they be needing to happen, before you can even begin to start the work. Now, parents tell us that they can have lost that connection with their child, especially if there's been very aggressive behaviour. How do they get that back? Well, one of the things I always say to a family is you need to connect before you can correct. And our work is around making those connections again. So what I actually thought would be quite helpful is to read you a parent's story, and this is one of the parents that I myself have worked with. I like families to try and do a testimonial after they've worked, because it's very cathartic for them. It shows them their journey. A lot of my parents, there are major literacy problems, so I will get someone else to describe it for them, but it's so important. And they always feel so proud of themselves, especially those that have been out of school, to say, God, I could never write anything on paper, but because this is about me and my life, it flowed, and that's the most wonderful feeling for them. So I want to read you this first, and then what I want us to do is try and plot where that family, what a parent was feeling on our ACT here, so that it really begins to make sense. I've got 2 other working models as well, and I think those also will then be important, and they'll make much more sense to you. So she starts with her name, obviously, and then she says, I'm 28 years old, a mother of 3 beautiful children, a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old. I wish I could be there. She was doing this for a presentation I was giving to teaching staff. So she says, I wish I could be there in person to tell you my story personally, but I have commitments as my children are seeing their dad in contact centre for the first time in months. Typical, it would be today. When I first met Family Lives 4 years ago, my self-esteem was on the floor. I loved my children desperately and wanted them to have regular routine and stable lives and to be able to support their emotional needs, but had absolutely no idea how to put it into practice. I was smoking crack and drinking heavily, although I always managed to look okay, but inside I was screaming. I was inconsolably anxious, scared, and felt rigid with fear, as I thought if anyone knew, I would have my children taken and be judged as a bad mother and a bad person. Family lives were non-threatening, but firm and loving, a real answer to my prayers and exactly what I needed. Trust is a key in any relationship. But for me, having been raped, beaten, addicted to drugs for years, trust was distant in my life with anyone. They showed a real, genuine desire to know me as a person and a genuine concern for me and my welfare, and consistently encouraged me to attend the groups. Shortly after committing to attend a drug rehabilitation centre, I agreed to attend the parenting groups, and I have looked back. It takes very special people to do their work. Sorry, I know it was a bit of a PR as well from her point of view, I think. So you just have to bear with me with some of it. It takes enormous patience, unfaltering love, honesty, and commitment, which not everyone will possess. If they had judged me in any way, I would have fled and run away. They may not have understood fully my choices in lifestyle, but accepted and challenged them without shaming me. I went on to having another baby after meeting Sara, and spent 2.5 years at the treatment centre, combined with the help of other services that they put me in touch with. I'm now 3 years clean. My 3 amazing children are still in my care. I've been out of my violent relationship for nearly 2 years, and my life and that of my children has been turned on its head. We have boundaries, we have routine, honesty, respect, and abundant love in our house. Today, I am a good mother. Of course, we have sibling rivalry, occasional drawing on the wall, occasional emotional turmoil over their messy relationship with their father. But we also have a thinking spot. We have rules, we have consequences, which are followed through with love. Thus providing 3 confident, self-affirmed, articulate and kind, respectful children most of the time, and a confident and self-affirmed mother. I think my point is that to get a mother to do the right thing by the children, you must first teach her and love her. How can you expect someone to give something that she has never been given herself? All of the changes I write about, bar none, are of a direct result of family lives, groups, the friends I have made there, and the way I have been nurtured and loved unconditionally. Family Lives regularly visits Theo, her little boy, who is the most aggressive, the middle one, and there is always support for me as a whole family unit or individually. So she goes on, obviously, to talk about her experience of us, and in fact I now consider her a parent ambassador, and her role in the school is actually her eyes and ears of looking out for some of those other vulnerable families that may not have wanted to engage with services. Families are very frightened of coming for help, and in a school setting where it is automatically offered, it makes such a difference. Families know that they're not going to be stigmatized. It's all for a teacher now to say to a parent, if you're concerned or I'm concerned about a child's behaviour, then they will automatically come to me for support, which is quite phenomenal, really. So I just want to move us on. I want to go back a little bit later to talk about because I'm aware of time, I'm going to come back to I'm going to show you on the next slide, which actually might be more useful, about putting some of the feelings that Lisa and that she was feeling onto the next tool, which I think would be helpful for you. So I'm going to leave that one for you to read in your own time, if that's all right. Okay, so this is the next tool. What we need to do often is be quite assertive with our children when they are being aggressive. But what's really important before we start telling them what to do, like I said, connect before correct, is actually to check and acknowledge what's going on for the child or teenager and how they might be feeling. If we haven't done that, then it is really difficult for you to change the behaviour. So one of the most important things, and if you sort of think of the child and in terms of the parent I started with, it could be anyone, it doesn't have to be child, it's other. It's, the other person. So what she was talking about was making that connection with her, wasn't it? It was about how is she feeling? What did she need? And although at times all three of her children's behaviour was a concern in school, by focusing time on her and her behaviour, that helped her see what her children may or may not be feeling. Now, she in fact was a child who was very aggressive. She was a bully. She was out of school by the age of 30. And she says, in fact, she only did 6 months in secondary school, and she has a very long police record as well. So she's exactly one of those children that we were talking about, that we really need to wanted to change the behaviour for the next generation. Okay, so what was she feeling? Would be quite interesting to know. She was scared, frightened. She talked, didn't she, about she also talked about feeling that she was out of control, and so all of those really would play a part in how she was managing herself. And her children, if they were seeing this parent that was out of control and not managing, if we put the child there, what might the child have been feeling? Well, I think the child could have been feeling fright. There wasn't consistency, so they needed boundaries. She said that she loved them, but often if she was drinking very heavily, they wouldn't have been feeling that they were cared for. So that would have picked that, they would have picked that up. What was going on for her? Well, I think definitely she would have been at times feeling guilt, as well as some of the other things that we've talked about. This is a really helpful tool for parents when they see this, because what it's saying is they can make a plan of what they're going to say. So what would they be saying to the child? Rather than screaming at them, I never get any help, why aren't you helping me? It might be something like, I can see you're enjoying doing whatever it is you're doing, and I would like you to help me do this. So beginning to help parents talk as I, because a lot of the time they've been talking as a you statement rather than an I statement. I would like you to, so that we get away from the criticising and blaming language. And I think the parent in question talks a little bit about that, about not feeling blamed or judged. So every interaction that I would have with a parent would be modelling what I want them to be doing with their own. We're going to come back to this a little bit later, but I wanted to come to the next slide. I've no idea how I'm doing for time. I've got someone help with me, so I'm going to see if she can give me a nod about time in a minute. Again, this goes back to the helpline. Parents were asked what directly influenced their child's behaviour. Have a moment to have a look at it. You can see that I can't read it without my glasses on. What did I do with my glasses? Right, this was about who influences your child's behaviour. This was quite interesting. Attitudes and behaviour of other members of the family. So again, that goes back to modelling, doesn't it? So if working in a primary school, I'm able to model that best behaviour, then that really, really helps. The unsure one was quite interesting. People didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know what might be triggering their behaviour. So it's that unsure group really that our work really works on, is helping them work out, well, what might be the reason for that. The underlying issues, I think that's really is the other, isn't it? What is it that they may be seeing? So there are some quotes here from people, but if I just give you the headings, bullying would be an underlying issue of why a child might be showing aggressive behaviour in the family home, because in fact they're being bullied outside in school or out on the street, and therefore They're trying to gain some control back. Domestic violence, a large number of the families I'm working with, the children have either witnessed domestic violence, or there has been domestic violence in the family, and that definitely has had a very large impact. Again, we'll come back to that. Other issues, inconsistent parenting, children with special needs, and divorce and family breakdown. So by being based in a school, I'm tackling each and every one of those. At the moment in my group, I've had 3 new parents join because they were mother wanted to leave the family home with her children, and that was impacting on child's behaviour towards her, much more aggressive behaviour towards the parent. The special needs section, I think that, as I told you, with our numbers in our school of children with special educational needs and the cutting of services, we're finding that families are waiting 2 years for medication for diagnosis and medication of ADHD. If there needs to be a change in medication, which is very often the case when they first go on it, because aggressive behaviour can get very much worse, we are waiting on average 6 weeks. In the last year, I've done a lot of work with the paediatric team. Now I'm at a point where I can be putting a call in and getting a parent actually re-prescribed medication within 4 days, but that's because I've made that personal effort, which other schools just don't have the manpower to do. The situation with CAMS, family therapy, it's an 18-month waiting list for a first appointment, and then you won't get another appointment for 6 weeks. So we're very sure that we're not getting consistent support for families. Some of these children who really end up, when I first started in the school, we had 34 children had been suspended when I first started at the school, and now we're down to, last year we had 2. So it's about having really challenging children's behaviour and working alongside the parent at the same time really is what makes the difference in the children's outcomes. This was wonderful ones that was going to flash up in front of you, but children's self-worth and self-esteem, a lot of aggressive behaviour, as you can imagine, comes from these feelings of confusion, of fear, of the family breakdown, anger. And what I wanted to very quickly show you is this. Again, this was going to be in 3 parts, and I'm aware of time, so I want to do it quite quickly. This is called the Fountain of Need, and this is, I think, one of the most powerful tools that a family ever come across, and it changes lives without a doubt. So if you imagine this lovely pond at the bottom is where your needs sit, and we all have a whole host of basic needs, and from those needs, when we either get them met or not get them met, attached to each one of those is a feeling. And the feeling rise. So I'm sure you've often heard of children or adults who've been aggressive talking about it as an explosion. So as you can see, this is our explosion here, whereby if you say have a need for comfort and reassurance, and you are feeling very much that you are on your own, the feelings that you may then feel are anger, frustration, upset, scared, and the feelings begin to rise, and we all know you can begin to feel them actually in your body. And then what happens is if no one notices those feelings, or there's nowhere to take those feelings, or those feelings aren't acknowledged, what then happens is we get this threatening, violent behaviour or shouting and swearing. Now with the families that I work with, I will often start with behaviour, and we will start with looking at tell me what your child is doing. And they can tell you in great detail. If I ask them what you think your child might be feeling under that behaviour, they often won't have a clue. And the key to this is understanding and beginning to make the connection for their child. I wonder if you are feeling X. And that's where ACT and CAT, those other 2 models, really come into play. So you would be saying, I'm wondering if you're feeling angry or you're feeling frustrated, and you need me to be hearing you. I mean, I think a big need for being understood, or to be to be comforted. And sometimes when you've got a child who's that angry, you don't feel like listening to them or understanding them. You actually just keep going on about the behaviour. Don't do this. You actually have to acknowledge what the feelings are and try and meet the needs. Now, not all needs can be met. Acknowledging that will make the difference. So, I just really wanted to summarise with what we talked in both CATS and ACT, which was tools. Only 50% of parents felt that went and actually sought help for their child's aggressive behaviour. Why bother seeking help was what they said. So, and I think before I joined the school, I think parents generally were told, well, you know, there's nothing much we can do about it. I think it's a really important element to look at what stops families going for help, because there are some great services out there. Why parents did not seek support, this graph, please spend a few minutes looking at this after. What I wanted to draw your attention to, though, was the green one, which talks about worried that their child or children would be taken away. Now, it's interesting. I was trying to work out why there was no green slot on this, because that's one of the first reasons the families I work with say they didn't come for help. I wondered if this was because this was an online survey. And the majority of my families do not have access to online machinery because they are on the lowest, on the sort of on the poverty line, a number of them. So is that why those families may not be considered to have a social worker in their lives? Are we looking at people who already have an aspiration, who've actually entered data onto this online questionnaire? It would be interesting to know if that's a factor, because for me that green area would have been quite large as to why they haven't. So what do we do? At the top you can see listen to families. That's again through helpline, live chat, website, individual support or groups. A lot of our groups are obviously have to be funded, so they may be community based if a children's centre or a school is prepared to pay for them. Exploration and understanding, that's the most important bit, and I think that's what the lady of that I gave you the case study of was saying. She felt understood, and that gave her the ability to explore, to take action. It's about them taking their own action, not about us taking action for them. I think that part of my job has been to work with a lot of the alcohol and drug and domestic violence charities that are in our area, and I work very closely with them. That getting support for those families is so important. So, outcomes for families, relief and reassurance. I think that it's not just me. Increased self-esteem, self-awareness, self-acceptance, confidence that families can make changes for themselves. It becomes self-fulfilling that once they manage it, and then they have new people in groups at the school who are just joining, who haven't managed it yet, really just ingrains in them, actually, I can make changes myself, and I can keep these changes up. They see a new parent, they think, blimey, I used to think like that, and then they can see, look how far I've come. It makes the school a community, it makes it a self-help community, and it means that parents help parents rather than it having to be professionals. And I just really want to, that's another case study which please do have a look at. Don't forget that we actually have a useful organisations links. Any agency, any national agency, if you go onto our website, you will be able to be taken straight through to the website, interactive website of any of those national charities, a national organisation. So I think it's really important that you know that if you use us, you will always be able to then go to other organisations for help. Downloadable leaflets, videos, podcasts, you name it, all of that is there. I hope this has been helpful. I also wanted just to say to you that we now have a widget, which is a very strange name. As you can see here, this little button here, supports. If you copy and paste that link into your own websites or schools or wherever you may be working, that takes families into direct live support, live chat and live on-help support. And we really are hoping that every organisation has that on their own website. And it would mean that families would be gaining support instantly rather than having to wait on some terribly long waiting list for specialist help. Parents and families can help themselves if they're given the tools, and we believe that they can have those tools through us and people like Oliver, and so a lot of the good work that's going on out there. So I hope I've finished on time. I'm waiting now for Jimmy to tell me, and that we can actually get some questions up online,
Hello.
please, which would be really good. I'm sure it'll take a minute or two for those to come through, and I'll definitely have to put my glasses on so that I can see them.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I've switched my mic back on, so if you can't see the questions, I will I can read them out. So hopefully you'll be able to hear them and answer them.
Okay.
Sorry that we've run over
Oh,
a little bit. I know some
okay.
people have had
Yeah.
to go. Thank you all for sticking around, and yeah, if you're all happy to hang around for a couple more minutes, then we can do some questions. So, Sarah, the first question is from Vicky Rue, who says, parents have shared when a child or teen is in a bad place emotionally, it might be very difficult for boundaries to be kept in place, possibly due to fear. Yet, when in a healthier emotional state, boundaries are not a problem, i.e. the parent sticks to boundary and child will be held by them. Is this your experience with parents you work with experiencing child-to-parent violence?
Yes, and that's why the very first model act is one of the most brilliant ones. Because what a parent has to do is take ownership of their own feelings and their own ability to manage it. So you're right, if a parent is feeling flooded or is feeling unbalanced, that's going to have a direct consequence on the sort of way that they will challenge the child and challenge the child's behaviour. So we do a lot of work on, well, when you feel good, you manage to say and do some of the tools, and the times when you're not feeling so good, they're not working. So making that, stopping at that red light, red traffic light, and doing a self-check, and families, parents get quicker at doing that self-check. How am I feeling? What do I need? Can I do this now? Will I be able to hold the boundary? That's really what makes the difference. Putting those traffic lights up in their trigger areas is what I always say. Where are you most likely to have an outburst? You tend to know where your child starts. Is it in the kitchen? Is it as you're getting in the bath? Is it when they're just going to they've just come off a video game or they want to go on a video game? Putting those traffic lights up in the trigger points helps to have a little hook for yourself.
Thanks, Sarah. The next question is from Sarah Jo Lee, who says, thanks, Sarah, that was really interesting. The outcomes slide did not mention outcomes in terms of reductions, cessation of violence and abuse. Do you have any data on this?
It may well be in the main report of the outcomes. So I would go back to the main report and have a look. If it's not, then you can actually request that from Family Lives through the website and actually find that out. But I can't remember from looking at it, but if you go online, you will be able to get that information.
Thank you. And yeah, also, if there is any other information that you want, if anything occurs to you afterwards that that you're not sure about, if you have any other questions, you can always email me, and I can pass questions on and seek out research and things like that for you. I think Oliver has left, but he did put his email address in earlier. So if you want his contact details, then they are a bit further up the chat, or just ask me, and I can provide those. Liz asks, please can we have this presentation sent online also? Yes, I will send round both sets of slides to all of you, so you'll all have those available, and we've been recording as well, so there's a video of the presentation if you want to go back and review anything. Do we have any more questions, or are we all set?
And if anyone would like me to... Jimmy, can I say something?
Yeah, please do.
Hasn't got me plugged in. Yeah, I was going to say there are a number of tools. I've only talked about 2 or 3 of them. If anyone would like more information or for me to talk to them directly, I'd be happy to do so.
Fab, thank you. Paula Wilcox is asking, how many other people like you are working in this way? Do you know?
Oh, I'm sorry to tell her that I'm the only one. And the headmaster yesterday, he said to me, we need 2 of me in the school, never mind 21 hours. He's always needing more hours. I have a waiting list of 17 parents at the moment, and rising, and all have social care issues, but these are families who would never have come forward for support and queuing. So that in itself tells us that they want a trusting relationship in order to make sense of what's going on.
Well, it's a start, Sara. It's a start. We've got, I think,
Yes,
let's
it
take one
is.
more question, and
If
then I
anyone
think we're
knows
going to
any
wrap
schools
up.
who are
We've
interested,
got
that's
one
the
coming
point.
in. Absolutely. So we'll take one more question. I see that Damien is typing a question in now. We'll take Damien's question and then we'll wrap up. And any other questions, just send them through, and we can do them after the fact. Damien says School Home Support is another charity who has parent engagement practitioners in school who closely support parents. Okay, so not a question, but just a bit of information on School Home Support. Thank you for that, Damien. All right, and thank you very much, Sara, and thanks again, Oliver, and thanks to all of you for making it such a lively discussion. It's been great to have you all sharing this virtual space together. I know it's probably almost impossible for all of us to get to the same actual space. So thank you once again. Great, great that you've all been able to make it. I'll be sending round feedback shortly, and yeah, if anybody does want to get in touch with Oliver or Sara, then I can send details of contact details for either of those, or I can pass this information forward. So just get in touch with me. You've got my email address, and it'll be attached to the feedback form that's coming around now. So go stretch your legs, have some lunch, do whatever it is you need to do, and then please do send those feedback forms. It would be really useful to know, that this all works and that it's a good format for everybody. So thank you very much, and we'll shut down there. Cheers.